I'm going to do a little promotional plug here. Over the last few years, I've been writing Star Trek fan fiction, and most of it hasn't been very good, and most of it I haven't finished. But there was one story that I finished, and it ended up being about 100 pages. And now I'm working on a sequel to it, and it's about the same length, but it's still in progress. But as I've been writing it, I've been uploading it to this website, fanfiction.net, which, if you haven't heard of it, is this really great website for all different kinds of fanfiction. They have thousands of stories on there from everything you can imagine, and they have pretty much every crossover you can imagine. It's just endless. But I've been uploading it on there, and I haven't gotten a lot of viewers, but it's actually been a really great experience because the people who have been reading have actually been commenting and reviewing consistently, and maybe I've gotten a total of maybe 20 reviews for the whole thing. But it's been really great because knowing that there's two people out there who are reading it, it's kind of helped me continue to write it. And since I've been home the last few weeks, I've been starting to write it again. So if you guys are interested in that, or if you read any Star Trek fan fiction, I'm going to put a link to that down in the information bar. Actually, I'm just going to put a little link up here too, so you can get to it from either place. But, by no means am I saying you have to go read this. But, if you're into Star Trek fan fiction and you feel like checking it out, it's just another Star Trek related thing that I've been working on. And I finally realized this yesterday, I'm doing Star Trek videos and I'm writing a Star Trek fan fiction that I'm putting online, so I might as well connect the two. So yeah, feel free to go check that out, and if you like it or hate it or whatever, message me about it or leave a review. Or not, just whatever you want to do.
Engage.
So today, I am going to be reviewing this book. It's called Seek Out New Life, The Biology of Star Trek. And the author's name, her name is Athena Andreadis, I think. She's Greek, so I'm not quite sure how you pronounce her last name. But what it does is she goes through a lot of different biological things that have been talked about in Star Trek, and she kind of discusses its implications in Star Trek, and she uses it as a kind of launching point to talk about whether or not it's possible or not, and just kind of give a background lesson on it and how it applies to our world. And she talks about a vast, the big assortment of different topics. She discusses interspecies breeding, genetic engineering in Star Trek, the types of societies they encounter. She discusses silicon-based life forms and whether they're possible. She talks about cybernetic organisms like the Borg. And I think this book is actually a really good idea because, obviously there's so much to talk about in Star Trek with all the different species that they encounter, and obviously biology is the basis of that. It's the basis of all the life that they encounter. So it's a really good idea. And I think that a lot of the topics that she brings up, such as discussing how the transporter looks, and looking at that not through the technological aspect, which I'm sure has been done a lot of times, but looking at it through the biological aspect. And I think it's actually, a really cool idea. But unfortunately, it doesn't really go past that. She spends way too much time discussing why things are impossible and why things wouldn't work, and she doesn't give it any leeway, really, of any sort. Because I think when you look at Star Trek, you have to realize that, first of all, it is science fiction. And second, it's a TV show, science fiction, that's been developing over the past, 50 or 60 years now. So obviously there's going to be inconsistencies, and obviously they're not going to be completely detail-oriented, especially when it comes to something like interspecies breeding. Because in the first or second chapter, that's something that she spent an entire chapter on, is discussing why it's impossible. Why people like Spock, half Vulcan, half human, and people like B'Elanna from Voyager, who is half Klingon, half human, Deanna Troi, why these people are impossible and why they can't exist. And I think that, obviously that is something that's very rooted in biology and interspecies breeding, and it's something that she definitely discussed in here, but I think that any person innately knows that that is impossible. Because, you look at things on Earth that interbreed, like donkeys and horses, you can create a mule, but mules are mostly sterile, and it doesn't always work. So obviously, two different species that have had two completely different evolutionary paths, and have grown up on different planets, like a Vulcan and a human, couldn't interbreed. And I don't think there's a lot that needs to be said about that, but she spends an entire chapter harping on, oxygen carriers, or the fact that human blood utilizes iron, and that Vulcan blood probably uses copper, since it's green. And she's talking about why that wouldn't work, and, would the child inherit a merging of the traits? Would it inherit a trait from one parent, not the other? And she just spends way too much time discussing these things that innately we know aren't possible. And she does it in almost a superior attitude, which I found kind of annoying. Like, she's constantly saying, maybe she thinks that for example, she thinks that cyborgs are possible, and she thinks that things like data and androids are possible. But then she was talking about the ability to transcend consciousness, and this was all in the same chapter, and to have a completely energy-based life form. And she said that's impossible, but the way she sums it up is saying, Star Trek probably should have stayed away from this kind of stuff because it's not possible. And she doesn't completely take into account that it is science fiction, and that obviously it's possible, and obviously, stuff like the holodeck would probably be impossible, with the way it creates matter and the way, transporters work. And even, the universal translator, these things probably wouldn't work. And we as fans, we realize that. And we aren't going to go try to create a transporter in our backyard. But she seems to almost take it personally, and she has to explain in detail why these things are impossible. And another thing that I found kind of annoying is that it's not even that Star Trek based. She uses things from Star Trek as a starting off point, but then she'll spend the next 5 pages discussing the way the brain works and discussing the way the mind creates the brain, or vice versa. And it actually did create a really interesting biology book. And I think I've actually learned stuff from this, but it's not a good Star Trek biology book because she goes on such huge tangents that you forget what she was talking about in the first place. So, overall, it was kind of an interesting book, just from the basis of a biology book. But the fact that she tried to tie it into Star Trek every once in a while, but not even that consistently, and she did it in such an annoying way that she was almost putting down the series consistently throughout the book, I think that she shouldn't have tried to even make it a Star Trek book at all. She should have either written a biology book, because she is a molecular biologist and she has her PhD, and she does a good job of putting stuff into layman's terms. So she either should have written a biology book for the masses, or she should have written a Star Trek biology book, but not taken it quite so seriously, and not done so much work and tried so hard to disprove these theories from Star Trek that most people accept wouldn't work anyway. So overall, it was an okay read. It was kind of a struggle to get through it at times. And at one point, she starts bashing Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and I was like, no, you do not put down Close Encounters of the Third Kind in a book that I'm reading. And she just constantly, puts down these little jabs at either Star Trek or different shows. And I feel like she shouldn't have written this book about Star Trek, so I would definitely not recommend this book. I found it a big disappointment. I'm sure that there are other books out there about Star Trek biology that not quite written from an in-universe perspective, because I'm completely open to people critiquing things from Star Trek. I think that's one of the fun parts, is figuring out what's possible and what's not. But a book that maybe takes into account a little bit more that it is a sci-fi show, and it's not meant to be taken completely seriously. So, as promised, I'm bringing you the answers from the Star Trek quiz book. I think I did this in the outro to the Chapter 4 of A Rock and a Hard Place video that I did last week. And what I did was I read questions about the second season, and now I'm going to go through and read the answers. Alright, so what was the name of the computer-generated, self-aware life form created accidentally by the holodeck? That was Moriarty. In which star system does the Enterprise make first contact with the Borg spacecraft? That was System J-25. An alien plant seriously injures Commander William Riker on this planet. That planet was Serata 4. Also, some of these names I'm not going to pronounce right because I haven't seen these episodes in a long time, so I might have forgotten how to pronounce them. Name the judge who ruled that Data, the life form, and therefore has the same civil rights as any human. That was Judge Advocate General Philippe Louveau. I'm not good with French. He replaced Tasha Yar as Chief Security Officer of the Enterprise. That was Worf. Which doctor replaces Beverly Crusher as the Chief Medical Officer of the Enterprise? That was Dr. Catherine Pulaski. Under whose command and on what ship did Geordie LaForge serve with prior to Picard and the Enterprise? That was Captain Zimbata on the starship Victory. To which Klingon ship in the Federation is Riker temporarily reassigned? That was the Poch. With which Klingon emissary did Lieutenant Worf have an affair and a child? That was Kalair. So, I actually really like this book. I want to read through more of it. But maybe I'll do another one of these again in the future or do some kind of trivia thing because it's actually really fun to read these.